Hey guys, this is Fred from Pretty Games, and this is episode 2 of how to build an Agario.io clone using Photon Fusion and Unity. In this episode we'll use the UI so the player can join a game, enter its name and also change the player's state. Let's get started. And now it's time to hook up our user interface so we can use this join game button and also use our nickname. So let's open a network and the network player script in Visual Studio. So the first thing we're going to add is some statistics so we can see what connection type we have and also what is our round trip time to the server so we can determine if we have a good ping or not. So we already prepared our in-game UI handler for this, and we're going to use that component. So let's just reference it, and then we need to use that in our wake function to actually get that component. So let's get that component, and then we want to continuously update this value. So we will use fixed update network, the function for this. And what we will check is if we are if we have input authority, so we are controlling the object, and that our input UI handler is not null. In that case we can actually use it and populate some information. So let's get some stats into that. And what we will use is we will use our function set connection type, and we will take it from runner current connection type to string. So that will show what kind of connection we have, and then we will bring out the RTT, the round trip time. So we will set the RTT to this string, and we will round the runner, and we will get the player RTT for our input authority. We will multiply it with 100 and round it so that we can get it in milliseconds. And well, we have two string here, but apparently it's not required. Then we want to add the ability for us to change the player's name. So we will want to be able to access the Text Mesh Pro component that is sitting on the player. So we're going to access that by calling it player nickname TM. And this information needs to be sent across the network as well. So it needs to be a networked variable. So what we will have is we will create a network string, call it nickname, and let's put that here. So we're going to use public network string and make it the size of 16 and call it nickname. And that gives us the ability to have this name, but we also need to react to whenever it is changed, so that all the clients are aware that, okay, now the network name has changed. So we will use the onChange function for that. So network onChange, and we'll call this onNicknameChanged function that we don't have yet, so we need to create that as well. And it needs to be a static function. So let's just figure out where we're going to have this spawned on player left, and let's add it towards the end here. So on nickname changed is going to get called, and we're going to call the changed behavior on nickname changed. So that's something that we need to do because of this static function here. So in order to reach into this code, we need to use behavior.onNicknameChanged. So we need to add that as a function as well. So what we will do is once that has happened on nickname changed, we will just write it to our debug log, and then we will change the nickname, the Text Mesh Pro components text to nickname. The challenge is now how we actually get this name change to occur, because it's only the server that is allowed to change a network variable. So none of the clients can do that. because if they change the nickname to something else, it will just get overwritten by the server. So in order to change anything on the server, we need to use an RPC call. So let's add our RPC call for this. So we'll use RPC from our input authority to the state authority, which is the server. And we will call this RPC underscore join game. And it's going to have a string nickname and then the RPC info. And we will once again just write it to the debug log that we have a RPC and the RPC join game and with the parameter nickname. And then once we have received this on the server, then it means that we can change the nickname. So we'll use this dot nickname and change it to the nickname that we received here. So what we need to do now is we need to trigger this RPC call from our UI. So let's add a public function called join game, which has an parameter, which is the nickname. And it will call the RPC join game with the nickname. So this function needs to be called from the in-game UI handler. So let's open our in-game UI handler, and this on join game is what happens, or which gets triggered when you're clicking that join button. So what we will do is, after we've written it to the log, we will go network player, get the local network player, trigger the join game function that we just added with the input field from where we put in the nickname. But we can't actually press the on join game button yet, because when the game is starting up, we're setting that to be false or disabled. So what we need to do now is, once the player has joined the game or has joined the server and connected, then we need to enable that again. So let's go to our network player, and on spawned here, then it means that we are actually ready to start interacting with it. So let's use our in-game UI handler that we already referenced and set join button state to true. And now we can save this and give it a try in Unity. But before we start the game, we need to hook up the fields in our prefab. So let's look at our network object, network player, and let's see where we have it. There we go, network player, and we need to use this text mesh. So let's assign that, and let's save it. And now we can take it for a spin and see what happens. So let's enter a name, Fred, press join game, and now our player is called Fred. So that's all good. But what we have now is the players is spawning before anything actually happens. So the game is actually running here as well. So what we want is not that behavior. We want it to not sort of become interactable before we have pressed our join game button here. So that's something we need to change. And if we look at this, we can see that our RTT is 0 milliseconds and our connection type is none. And that's because I'm running right now in the editor, and my RTT is 0 because, well, I'm directly connected to the host in this case. But once we compile it, those values will change, so we can have a look at that a little bit later. So let's stop our game. To implement this, let's go and open our scripts, network player in Visual Studio again. So we need a way of controlling the state of the player so that we know what state it is in. So we will add an enum for this, and we'll put it here so that we can see it. So it will be an enumeration of our player states, and it can be a state of pending connection, connected, playing, and dead. So that's our states that we have in our game, and those are the ones we're going to use. And once again, we are going to use a network variable for this. So let's add that, and we can add it after our nickname here. So we're going to do again on player change state, and we are going to use our public player state and our player state here with the get and set. So let's add our on player state changed, and we'll do that after our nickname changed, and we'll do it the same way. First we'll add the static void on player state changed, and then we need to call the behavior on state changed. So let's add that behavior. Here we go. Perfect. So what we want to do is we want to react to when the player is becoming sort of, first of all, when it's starting up, then it's going to be in the connection phase. But once it's playing, we want actually the player to start interacting, and we want it to sort of update the position and we want to show the player. But before that, we want to hide the player. So in order to be able to control this showing and hiding, we need to access the sprite renderer of our player. So let's bring in our sprite. So we'll add a header sprite and take in our sprite renderer. So now we can start manipulating this. So let's go back into our on player state changed, and let's check our player state. So if we are in the playing state, so we are active and we are playing, then first of all we want our camera to jump to our player right away. We want it to get to its location. So we'll use, if we have the input authority over this object, so it's our object, then we will move the camera instantly to our position instead of lerping it, because otherwise if we are spawning on the other side of the map, it's going to take some time for the camera to get there. So we're just jumping with the camera there. And then we want our player sprite to be enabled. So we're setting it to active, so it's showing up. And we want as well the player to be able to move. So we're going to say that, okay, our movement handler, which we haven't added a reference to, we need to do that later, should be enabled. Okay, so then we have the reversed. If we are not playing, so we are in another state, then we want to set our player sprite to be disabled. We don't want our player to move, so we'll set the movement handler to disabled. And later on we want to do some other things like show our UI again, but we'll get back to that in a little bit later. So now we need to add our reference here to our movement handler. So let's add that, our movement handler, there we go. And in our awake function, let's grab that as well. Then we will add a helper function that will help us shift this state. So we will add a reset player that will also be called when a player dies or has died and want to come into the game again. And it will be called at the start as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a new position, because if the player has died, we don't want it to start at the same position. So we'll grab a new position. And then we will teleport the player into that position. So we will get our component, network rigid body, and we will teleport to position, new position. So using the teleport to position makes sure that it actually moves instantly into this position instead of interpolating or anything like that. So it will look fairly strange if something is interpolating across the whole map. All right, and then once we have done that, we want to say that, okay, our player state is changed into playing. So that's good. And when do we want to call reset player? It's going to be called here. After we have set up our nick, then we are going to do a reset player. Okay, so that's good. Then we will make one tiny change to network spawner, and that is when we are joining, we want to update the state to connected. So once we have spawned our player here, we will change its player state to connected. Okay, let's save all of this and try it in Unity and see what happens. So once again, before we try it, let's open a network object and let's assign our player sprite renderer here. So we'll add that, and let's save it, and then we can take it for a spin. Alright, connecting to server, join game, and now actually nothing has happened, which is good. We are not seeing the player, and nothing is moving right now. So let's press join game, and that disappears, and now we can control our player, which is great. So I quickly compiled a server build, so let's start up our server so we can see how that looks. So we have the server up and running, and let's bring in a client so we can have a look at that as well. Okay, so here we have our connecting to server on player joined, and we have a player. And now we can see actually that we have an RTT of 2-3 milliseconds, and our connection type is direct. So we're connected directly to the server, which is great. And then we can just provide a name, Freddy. And let's bring in another client. Eddie, and let's join the game, and here we can see that Freddy and Eddie are playing together, so that's good, but they are exactly the same color, so it will be quite hard to, well, not hard because we have the names, but it's not that fun. So let's change that and add some colors to the players. So let's change our sprite color. So let's go back into network player, and we will do it in the same way as we have done with the other things. We will create a network variable so that we can access our color, or not access, we want to share it with the clients because they need to know what color the player has. So public color, sprite color, and we need to add our on color change. So let's scroll down, and let's add it after on player state changed. And this time we can do it a little bit differently than we have done before. We can simplify it. So in our static variable or static function call, we can actually access the whole thing. So let's do a change behavior.player sprite renderer color, change it to change behavior and the network variable sprite color. Then we also need to actually assign a value to our sprite color. So let's have a look and say that, okay, when we are spawned, that's where we are here. So in this case, we want to change the color of our player, but we can only do it if we are the state authority, because the state authority can only change variables, right? So we have our sprite color, and we are going to use Unity engine.random, and then we're going to grab the color HSV. So that the color HSV is a way of getting colors in a different way. The benefit of it is that we can change how much saturation, and that can help us to produce brighter sort of color, pastel colors. So with this setup, we have min hue 0, max hue 1, saturation min 0.7, max 1, and then min value 0.5 and max value 1. So that will create a nice bright sort of pastel color. So now we can save that and try it in Unity. And once again, I've already pre-compiled the server, so let's just start that up, and let's bring in some clients. Ooh, we got a nice green color there. Let's see. Maybe. It almost got the same color, but a little bit different. Let's just make it a little bit smaller. And yeah, let's bring another one. Hopefully we'll get the... Oh, there's Eddie. Yes, he got the purple one. Yeah, so there we have the basics of our movement. We have the basics of our color handling and the ability to provide a name. I'd like to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. It helps us with every single contribution that we can get. So please consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. This concludes this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell to get a notification when the next video is out.